Welcome to the deep dive. Ever thought about time travel? I mean, really thought about it.
It's definitely one of those concepts that grabs the imagination.
Totally. You've got things like the Marvel timekeepers,
Right.
guarding the timeline, or even Stephen Hawking's idea, his chronology protection conjecture.
Right. The idea that the universe itself might just uh, prevent paradoxes, like a built-in safety mechanism.
Exactly. But then you look at the physics, and, well, the usual problems crop up, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. You could run into things like needing negative energy, which is weird.
Yeah, very weird. And quantum effects making things super complicated, plus the obvious question, if time travel's possible, where are all the tourists from the future?
Good point. The kind of time machines we imagine in sci-fi face some pretty serious hurdles based on current physics.
Okay, but hang on. Here's where we take a bit of a left turn. We're not really talking about science fiction today.
No, not in the usual sense.
Our deep dive is digging into something pretty serious, actually. A theoretical idea from particle physics. It suggests a potential form of time travel involving neutrinos through extra dimensions.
That's it. It sounds, I know, maybe a bit wild.
Yeah, just a bit.
But it actually stems from published research trying to explain some persistent puzzles about neutrinos themselves.
Puzzles and experiments.
Exactly. The thinking is that maybe the structure of space-time, beyond our usual 3 dimensions plus time, might offer these particles. Well, shortcuts?
Okay, extra dimensions, neutrino time travel. I get it if you're skeptical listening to this, but we're going to unpack it.
We are. We're looking at research, exploring these theoretical models, these hidden dimensions, and a specific type of particle called a sterile neutrino.
Right. And the really fascinating part, how scientists are actually thinking about using real experiments, neutrino experiments, to test these kinds of fundamental ideas about cause and effect. It's pretty mind-bending.
It really is. So the core of this whole thing rests on the idea of extraspatial dimensions.
More than the 3 we know. Up, down, left, right, forward, back.
Precisely. Theory suggests there could be more, just maybe curled up incredibly small so we don't perceive them directly.
Okay.
And in certain theoretical frameworks, especially these things called asymmetrically warped brain spacetimes.
Whoa. Okay, asymmetrically warped brain spacetimes. Let's break that down a bit.
Sure. So think of our universe, the one we experience, as like a membrane or a brain.
Like a sheet.
Yeah, exactly. Floating in a higher dimensional space, often called the bulk.
Okay, brain and bulk. Got it.
Warped means space-time in this bulk isn't flat. Distances, gravity, they can be distorted, like looking through a funhouse mirror almost.
Mm-hmm.
And asymmetrically just means that warping isn't the same everywhere or in every extra dimension. It's uneven.
Right, so how does that uneven warping create a shortcut?
Well, imagine if traveling through one of these warped extra dimensions through the bulk is actually a shorter path between 2 points than staying on our brain.
Like cutting across a field instead of following the winding road.
Exactly like that. So a particle that can access this bulk path, and the idea is maybe sterile neutrinos could travel between 2 points on our brain faster than light could if light is stuck on the brain.
So it looks faster than light from our perspective.
Yes. From our 4D perspective, it appears superluminal. But in the higher dimensional reality, it might just be taking a more direct route.
Okay, that alone is pretty wild. Sterile neutrinos using extra dimensions as express lanes? But how does that connect to actual time travel, like loops?
Ah, this is where it gets even more interesting, and where having at least 2 differently warped extra dimensions comes into play.
2?
Let's call them U and V, just as labels. Each has its own specific different warping. Now, the theory suggests that these shortcuts, especially if viewed from a moving frame of reference, could potentially lead to what physicists call closed time-like curves, CTCs.
Closed time-like curves. That's the theoretical basis for time travel, isn't it? Space-time looping back on itself.
Pretty much, yeah. Imagine a signal takes a shortcut through dimension U. Under the right conditions, involving relative motion and the specific warping, it could potentially arrive at its destination with what looks like a negative time coordinate.
So it arrives before it left, from a certain point of view.
Effectively, yes. It seems to violate causality from our 4D view. Now, that's weird, but maybe not a full loop yet.
Right.
But if there's a second extra dimension, V, with its own different warping, it might provide a pathway back from that negative time point to the original starting point in spacetime.
Ah, so the first dimension gets you there early, and the second one gets you back to the start, closing the loop.
That's the theoretical possibility, yes. It needs both asymmetric dimensions working together in a specific way.
Okay, this is fascinating. So these theoretical loops rely on these extra dimensions, and you keep mentioning sterile neutrinos. Why them? What's special about them?
Well, sterile neutrinos are hypothetical, first off. We haven't definitively detected them yet. But the idea is they're sterile because they wouldn't interact via the weak nuclear force, which is how the known neutrinos, the active ones, interact with matter.
So they're kind of aloof, less connected to our usual particles.
Exactly. That stealthiness makes them plausible candidates for particles that might be able to leave our brain and travel more freely in the bulk, in these extra dimensions.
Because they aren't tied down by the forces that keep other particles stuck here.
That's the thinking. And the theory also proposes that these sterile neutrinos could mix with the regular active neutrinos we know about.
Meaning they can transform into each other.
Yes, change from one type to another. So an active neutrino could potentially turn into a sterile one, take an extra dimensional shortcut, and then turn back into an active neutrino later.
Wow. Okay.
Ooh.
So is this just math on a blackboard, or can you actually, test this?
This is the really exciting part. There is a proposed experimental setup. It hasn't been built, it's very challenging, but it's theoretically conceivable.
A real experiment for potential neutrino time travel. How would that even work?
Okay, so the concept involves generating a beam of active neutrinos, say, at a lab near one of the Earth's poles.
Okay, like the South Pole, maybe?
Yeah, potentially. Then you aim this beam straight through the Earth.
Through the planet.
Yep. As the neutrinos travel through the Earth's interior, the changing density of matter, especially in the core, could trigger something called the McKeeves-Smirnov-Wolfenstein effect, the MSW effect.
Ah, the MSW effect. That's about how neutrinos change flavors or oscillate differently when they pass through matter, right?
Exactly. The dense matter could enhance the probability of active neutrinos transforming into these hypothetical sterile neutrinos.
Okay, so the Earth's core acts like a converter.
In a sense, yeah. Now, if these sterile neutrinos are created deep inside the Earth, the theory suggests they could then take one of these shortcuts through an extra dimension.
Dipping through the bulk while the active ones stay on the brain.
Potentially. Then, as they emerge from the Earth, say near the equator, they could convert back into active neutrinos that we can detect.
So you'd have detectors at the equator looking for neutrinos that came from the pole.
Right. But here's the truly mind-bending part, involving the Earth's rotation.
Rotation, how does that factor in?
If the sterile neutrinos really took a shortcut that corresponds to a space-like interval in our 4D space-time, meaning a path that would require faster-than-light travel, if confined to our dimensions, then the relative motion between the emitter at the pole and the detector at the equator, due to the Earth's spin, could lead to a causality-violating observation.
Meaning?
Meaning, from a specific theoretical viewpoint or frame of reference, the detection event at the equator could be registered before the emission event at the pole.
Wait, you detect it before you send it?
In that specific frame, yes. It's a consequence of how space-time coordinates transform when you have these apparent faster-than-light or space-like shortcuts involved. Seeing that reversal of emission and detection order would be, well, pretty strong evidence that something extremely weird involving causality was happening.
And that is genuinely staggering.
Yep.
Detecting a particle before it was sent because it took a dimensional shortcut back in time. Okay, but what about the usual time travel headaches? Paradoxes, needing exotic matter, that sort of thing.
Right, the energy conditions. That's a huge hurdle for most time travel ideas. Violating things like the null energy condition or weak energy condition often implies negative energy densities, which we've never observed, and which can make theories unstable.
Yeah, negative energy always sounds like theoretical hand-waving.
It can be. But this specific brain world model, with carefully chosen mathematical forms for the warp factors, how those extra dimensions are curved, it actually has a potential way around that. The calculations suggest that it might be possible to have these shortcuts, and even CTCs, while still satisfying key energy conditions on the brain.
So our observable universe could still obey the normal rules of energy, even if something weirder is happening in the bulk in the extra dimensions.
That's the claim. The violations needed for the shortcuts might be confined to the bulk dimensions, preserving conditions like the weak and null energy conditions in our 4D spacetime. It's a significant theoretical advantage.
So it sidesteps the need for negative energy here.
Potentially, yes, for some of the most important conditions. It doesn't necessarily solve all problems. The strong energy condition might still be violated on the brain, for example, but it's a step towards a more physically plausible scenario than many others.
That's a really clever potential loophole. Okay, so this whole elaborate idea, extra dimensions, sterile neutrinos, time loops, brain worlds, you mentioned it started partly because of odd experimental results.
Absolutely. This wasn't just pulled out of thin air. There have been anomalies, results that don't quite fit the standard picture in experiments like LSND back in the day, and more recently, Miniboon.
Anomalies in how neutrinos oscillate, how they change types.
Yes, they saw hints of oscillations happening in ways that the standard model, even with known neutrino masses and mixing, couldn't easily explain.
And the idea is that sterile neutrinos taking shortcuts could explain these odd results.
That's one of the motivations. The thought is that if sterile neutrinos exist and can take these shortcuts, their journey through the warped extra dimensions would affect their quantum mechanical properties. Specifically, it could alter the usual relationship between their energy and momentum.
How so?
It's what's called an altered dispersion relation, or ADR. Basically, the warping of space-time they travel through effectively changes how their energy relates to their momentum from our 4D perspective. This could look like a violation of Lorentz symmetry just for them on our brain.
Even if the underlying physics in higher dimensions is Lorentz symmetric?
Exactly. The asymmetry in the warping breaks that symmetry effectively on our brain. This altered energy-momentum relationship would then affect how these sterile neutrinos oscillate and mix with active neutrinos.
And that could explain the unexpected patterns seen in LSSD and Miniboon.
That's the hypothesis.
Yeah.
Researchers have developed specific neutrino mass models incorporating these asymmetrically warped extra dimensions precisely to see if this sterile neutrino shortcut idea can quantitatively explain those experimental anomalies. It generates different effects than standard matter effects like MSW.
Wow. So the very experiments that gave puzzling results might have been accidentally bumping into evidence of extra dimensions and eventual causality shenanigans.
It's an incredibly tantalizing possibility, isn't it? That the strangeness of neutrinos isn't just about particle physics, but might be a window into the fundamental nature of space-time itself, and maybe even showing that cause and effect isn't quite as rigid as we assume.
It really turns things on their head. Thinking that these tiny, ghostly particles could be linked to such huge questions about reality, time, it's amazing. And it's a huge if, but if experiments ever confirm something like this, well, it would revolutionize physics.
Completely. Our whole understanding of the universe would need a rewrite.
Even being purely theoretical at this stage, the fact that scientists can formulate these ideas and even propose ways to test them, however difficult, is just fascinating.
It really is. And it leaves you with a profound thought, doesn't it? Could the elusiveness, the weirdness of neutrinos be more than just a quirk? Could it be a hint from nature about a deeper, richer, multidimensional reality where time and space are maybe more flexible than we ever imagined?
It makes you appreciate the sheer audacity of it all, using particle beams and detectors to probe the very foundations of causality.
Absolutely. It's pushing the boundaries of what we can even ask.
Well, if this deep dive has got you thinking about extra dimensions, sterile neutrinos, and maybe even time loops, there's a lot more out there to explore. Digging into neutrino oscillations and the ongoing experimental mysteries is a great place to start. It's truly a frontier where particle physics meets cosmology and fundamental questions about reality. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.